Welcome to the luxury world. Get inspired with us today and tomorrow. Many people consider Rolex to be the best among the major Swiss watchmakers. Most likely, when you consider luxury watches, Rolex is the first watch brand that comes to your mind. Rolex does have more than 500 patents towards its name today, and all the company's timepieces are still mostly produced by hand. One of the few watch manufacturers to do so is Rolex, which produces its platinum and gold in a separate factory. The extraordinary level of craftsmanship and durability of Rolex is the cause for its first popularity. These watches are made to last, have solid construction, and do not have any extraneous complications. They keep suitable time for decades, and every year, Rolex has always something to celebrate. Some of their watches will have a strong year in 2023. One of the watches that will be celebrating its major anniversary is the Rolex Daytona, as it will turn 60 this year. Nobody at all knows what Rolex is up to in the scenes. It certainly makes sense to assume that this year's Daytona will be different and unique. So in today's video brought to you by The Luxury World, we will be sharing with you some considerations to bear in mind if you are considering purchasing a Rolex Daytona this year or in the future. If you still have not subscribed to our channel yet, make sure to do it now so you can stay updated on our future videos. When talking about the best Rolex watches for investment, we cannot forget the classic timepiece from Rolex, the Daytona. Rolex Daytona has become one of the most recognizable and significant Rolex watches. The Rolex Daytona Paul Newman, which belonged to actor Paul Newman, holds the record for being the most expensive watch ever sold. This watch fetched a staggering $17.75 million at auction. Rolex Daytona is a well-liked timepiece among watch collectors, especially older Rolex Daytona watches. Like the GMT Master and Submariner, the Daytona has a variety of reference numbers, each of which has its own set of requirements. This watch talks about a great investment. The fact that it's practically impossible to purchase these timepieces at retail makes it more clear that Daytona is one of the most sought-after timepieces from the crown. As many of you are aware, there is significantly more demand than supply, and even though Rolex produces about 1 million watches annually, only a small portion of those are Daytonas, and that portion must be distributed to authorized dealers around the world, many of whom will charge significantly higher prices. They end up on the gray market, where they are more expensively offered by independent dealers. This explains why Daytonas continue to fetch twice their suggested retail price on the black market, despite prices for them declining. Older people who have been in the watch collecting business for a while will tell you that this was not always the case. Race car drivers and aficionados served as the inspirations for the first Daytona, the Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, which was introduced in 1963. The Rolex Daytona's worth before is not the same as what we see in the market today. Authorized dealers previously had trouble selling Daytonas used to be sold before they ever made it to the display case, but not anymore. The price decline of high-end watches like the Rolex Daytona, Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, and Patek Philippe 5711 after nearly 5 years of explosive increase was maybe the biggest watch story of 2022. Around March or April 2022, the price of a mint-conditioned current production reached its peak. The 116500LN is being sold in Daytona for around 3 times its retail cost. This market correction has been influenced by geopolitical issues like the conflict in Ukraine and global economic factors like rising inflation and the collapse of cryptocurrencies. It's still really hard and really expensive to buy a Daytona, and it was because of the buyer's market. Recent developments include the advent of Rolex's certified pre-owned CPO program, which allows customers to return their watches to the brand and allows authorized dealers to sell certified pre-owned Rolex watches that have undergone brand inspection and are at least 3 years old. Although it is yet unclear how this will impact the second and gray market, the general belief is that these CPO Rolexes, particularly the Daytonas, will cost much more than the industry standard. And now, some background information. When a Paul Newman Daytona went up for sale at Philippe's in October 2017 in New York City, everything changed. Or rather, everything changed rather rapidly. However, this Paul Newman Daytona was not just any Paul Newman Daytona. It was the Paul Newman Daytona, owned by the actor himself and featuring a unique case back. The watch sold for $17 million, the highest price ever paid for a wristwatch, and people went insane at that time. For the watch industry, the vintage watch industry, and the Rolex Daytona itself, that point was vitally crucial. It turned a significant number of heads in the watch industry and beyond, and it served as the impetus for the recent boom in watch investments. Prices for rare vintage Daytonas are still quite high, even though newer Daytonas are leveling off on the second-hand and gray markets. Here are some significant dates from the Daytona timeline. 1963. The year when the rock band Beatles started to rise is all the same year Rolex Daytona was born. A modified manual process Valjoux 72 movement, a 36.5mm case, and a price of roughly $200 were all features of the Rolex Daytona at the time. Rolex did produce pre-Daytona watches before then, but we'll start with the year that the name Daytona first appears on the dial. 1988. Rolex changes the internal movement and adapts a Zenith El Primero automatic chronograph mechanism for Daytona. In addition, Rolex increased the case's diameter to 40mm, added crown guards, and changed the bezels from plastic to solid steel. As they are referred to and are still extremely collectible, Zenith Daytonas, and a lot of people think that Zenith's usage of the El Primero movement in the watch was ultimately what kept the firm alive. 2000. In the year 2000, Rolex switches out the Zenith movement for one of their own. The Daytona reference 116520 is the first in-house Rolex Daytona, powered by the caliber 4130. 2016. Rolex introduces the reference 116500LN in 2016, the first Daytona with the company's distinguishing Serrochrome bezel. This Rolex steel Daytona reference has remained unchanged for 7 years. Going back to the present year 2023, nobody can predict the future. But because this year marks a milestone, the 116500LN reference feels a touch dated. Let us create a fast buying guide for the contemporary Daytona market, sort of like a hierarchy. We will examine Daytonas in production right now to compare themselves to their other models. The most affordable Daytonas will be two-tone. Starting at $16,000 to $17,000, the Zenith Daytona 16520 and the entirely in-house 116520 are both available. As usual, in good condition, the original box and papers and other items will cost more. Starting at about $20,000 are references to fully steel 116520. Black dials are typically somewhat less expensive than white dials. If you choose to use a ceramic bezel around this time, the second generation 116500LN begins to be sold on the secondary market for $26,000. The same dial pattern of white being more expensive than black is evident here. Following that, chaos ensues as we adopt vintage Daytonas following the references we referred to earlier and precious metal iterations in platinum, white gold, yellow gold, and rose gold, not to mention Eye of the Tiger designs, rainbow sapphire bezels, and meteorite dials. Nothing appeals to the luxury buyer more than exclusivity, something Rolex is well aware of, particularly their DNA timepieces, like the Rolex submariners, which are purposely restricted to increase demand. Rolex only sells a small amount of each new edition. The search for a Rolex is similar to looking for the proverbial pot of gold, due to lengthy waiting lists around the globe. We still have to wait and see the future for the Rolex Daytona, and we hope we can see something new this year. What are your thoughts about the Rolex Daytona? Do you get predictions for what kind of Daytona we might see this year? We would like to see your answers and opinions in the comment section. If you liked this video, we will be glad if you let us know that too. Don't forget to follow us and give us a thumbs up. Once again, this is The Luxury World, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next videos.